The largest data breach of 2023 was a supply chain attack. So let's learn all about it. Thank you for joining. This is Threat Talks. My name is Leeuw-Jan Koning, and from the Security Operations Center floor here at Ontoit, we present to you Threat Talks, the deep dive.
Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity.
Let me briefly introduce my two guests today. Rob Maas, who is field CTO of Ontoit. His job is to make everything better, basically everything more resilient. And then on the other side, it's Luca Cipriano. He's a threat intel specialist, and he knows all about these threats in very much detail. Luckily, he can also explain about it in layman's terms. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
The largest data breach of 2023, by the numbers then, 60 million individuals were affected, basically. It was a breach at MOVEit. Luca, can you explain what happened?
Yes. So first of all, what is MOVEit? MOVEit is basically a software that allows exchange of data or critical information between systems or companies or users in a secure way. The reason why this breach had such a big impact, probably especially in the US, it's because the company that produced MOVEit, they also have a special contract with the US federal agencies because they basically okay, sorry.
They comply with a certain standard.
Thanks. Yeah, I got stuck 1 second. Yeah, they comply with the FIPS standard, and basically, it's widely used in the US. So the Clop ransomware group, which is a cyber criminal group that's specialized in ransomware or extortion and data theft, they basically found the zero-day vulnerability, which basically was a SQL injection, and that's what they exploited to steal personal data and critical data.
Now, we covered SQL injections before in previous episodes. We'll provide the link in details if you want to learn more about that. So basically what you're saying is this government-related data and secret data, because
not only government, they do also like healthcare or other like critical infrastructure. So
it's a good target to get after. Eh?
Yes,
and they were financially motivated, right?
Yeah, they usually are they're financially motivated. So it's mostly like ransomware, extortion. So for them, it was like a jackpot, basically. If I'm not mistaken, also they mentioned that they did not steal or they did not touch any government-specific documents. So they were only after data that could be sold online or they could make money out of it.
Yeah, it could have been a threat actor, and then maybe secret stuff is...
Well, I mean, you can't trust them, of course, for what they say, but that's, yeah.
Difficult situation, Rob, because you have a solution like this. It's FedRAMP approved probably, and all the certifications are in place, and then this happens.
It's unfortunately a risk you cannot completely mitigate. So basically, you trust someone else with your data, and if then you can of course hope that they have done everything right, and you can check it to a certain amount by the certifications. But if there's still a vulnerability there and it gets abused, then your data is basically lost, or at least lost the spread. Yeah.
Stolen.
Stolen, yeah.
So and they did a SQL injection?
Yes. So basically, the SQL injection, we already explained it in the past, but just as a quick recap, SQL is basically a programming language that is used to manipulate the data that is in a database, and the SQL injection is basically when an attacker is allowed to inject malicious code in the database, and these malicious codes will allow the attacker to do things that normally is not supposed to do. For example, manipulate, add things to the database, remove them, or remote code execution, a lot of different things. So in this case, for these attackers, the SQL injection allowed them to install a web shell on the server. This web shell was called I hope I said it correct. Lemurloot.
Lemur.
Yeah.
Like the animal.
It's written, I think so, yeah. That's written like Lemmer.
Well, isn't this the movie of Madagascar?
Yeah,
I like to move it. Yeah. Well, that explains.
I don't know if that's for that, but could be because they were Lemmer. So Lemmerloot. Well, makes sense. Maybe we're up to something. Well, basically, this web shell.
Malware specifically for this company, then.
Or
Disney.
Like yeah, or Disney indeed. I don't know if it was Pixar, probably Madagascar. Yeah, but anyway, without sidetracking, what this web shell allowed to do, it was basically they could discover the structure of the database, and based on the structure of the database and the database used, they were able to do several things. So the first thing that they will do with this web shell would install like a randomly generated 36-character password that the C2 server used to authenticate to just communicate back to the server, and they were able. The function of this web shell was to retrieve Microsoft Azure system settings, for example, or enumerating all the details underlying the SQL database. They could also store files or retrieve files based on string from the MOVEit transfer. From the movie transfer server, but they could also create new accounts with administrative privileges, reset the password that they created. So it was really good for a good persistence on the.
Yeah, so they were all in, basically.
Yeah, basically, yes. They were in and they could steal all the data and everything. And as you can imagine, this kind of software are used to, share critical data, critical information that's done on purpose, not to use normal media that you will use like email address or chat to just
almost by definition it's sensitive data, which is otherwise how about
you wouldn't
we have we sell a similar product.
We do have something similar, and in general you use it for exactly classified data that's not supposed to.
Yeah. So Rob, what should you advise a CISO and a CIO if you want to transfer files safely?
Yeah. So I think it starts with know what kind of data you need to share. So don't overly share data. So only the fields and the data that you actually want. Is the first last name, is it sufficient? And only do those two fields. If a social security number is not needed, don't add it, for example. So be very precise about what you want to share, so that in case things go sideways, like in this example, that only that data is lost and not all the sensitive data. I think that's a good starting point. There's
data that doesn't exist cannot leak.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a good starting point. So don't collect data you don't need, and don't share data that doesn't need to be shared.
Yeah. One thing, for example, we have like an application here in the Netherlands to share the copies of the ID and password, and you can put watermark on it that you can explain what is the reason for the sharing of the data. That can help the person also. If my ID is used for something else, I can say, no, there's a watermark. It's explained clearly what was the document shared for. So it limits a bit also the abuse that.
Your personal identifiers, like your ID, for example.
Yeah, for example, in your ID.
Yeah, government actually says, advises, if you need to share your ID, put a watermark on it, purpose, because I buy a new car or I travel. Or,
I always do that when I share it. Almost always. Sometimes I forgot, but I always use the watermark.
People don't make it easy to do that.
I also think people don't understand what the data is basically worth. So what you can do with a valid passport or with a valid ID card without those watermarks.
Should be much more aware.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. But that's what you get also from a lot of people when you say like, but don't share your data, or they track your data. They was like, I don't have anything to hide. I don't care. Yeah, but that's not that you're hiding something. It's that they're gonna use it in a bad way. That's the problem.
Yeah, and multiple pieces of data combined
together. Yes.
Yeah. Some financial institutions still ask you for your mom's birthday or so if they try to identify you, which is really weird to me because. You train people to give up small pieces of information, and altogether you can then apparently authenticate.
But there's also like a lot of open source, the OSINT resources that you can really retrieve so much data from people from previous leak and this kind of things that it's really trivial to get those kind of information for an attacker. For me, for you, for everybody.
You now even have services that remove the data from the internet. Even Firefox has such a service. But the question then is, how do I know for sure that the data is being removed?
Yeah.
And what about encryption? Because they had access to a database. Aren't those files encrypted by a key?
The file per se is not encrypted. It's the communication that is encrypted. So basically, it's how you transfer the file.
Isn't that a big flaw for a service like that, then?
Well, how are you going to encrypt every file? Like,
It technically is possible, but programs don't implement it basically, or they want to have their own way. Microsoft has a way of doing this, but then it means that the receiver also needs to use the same software and the same tools. Yeah.
Because the problem, for example, here that one of the biggest companies affected was like Maximus. That's one, I think, healthcare provider in the US, and they just managed to get 11 million of data from 11 million of individuals, and I assume that if you have medical records, then they need to be shared across probably different companies, not only one.
Yeah, so it's a key exchange problem then.
Well, yeah, you need a standard.
We've had this for years, like a PGP kind of technology.
Back in the days, and now I'm feeling old, but
like
you had PGP. PGP is still around to encrypt your emails and send it to each other. But to send an encrypted email, for example, to you too, then you should have my public key to decrypt it. Yeah. And then I first need to find a way to make sure that you have my public key. Back in the days, you had this PGP parties where you basically come together and then share the public keys. But it wasn't
PGP parties. I was never invited.
It was not a huge success.
They didn't trust you.
For non-technical
trust me,
people.
Were you invited then?
No, I was not invited. But how did you do it?
It was a pizza party, I think, with pineapple pizza.
That's why I declined. No, but how did you do it? Like, were you coming with like a piece of paper with your key written
we had
down?
floppy disk at that time.
Oh, okay. Oh, floppy disk.
Very modern.
So the technology exists for years and years already?
The technology
Sorry
is
for our younger audience. What are floppy disks?
It's kind of a USB stick, but then flatter.
It's like the safe icon. That's very
but the technology is there. It's possible to do end-to-end encryption. Yeah. But there are some challenges, and I think we should go to really good standards. I know there's the TDF is there, TFD, Trusted Document Format, TDF. Mm-hmm. Which tries to do this and address this, but it is not widely used amongst companies. So
yet. But the US government has a big push on it.
Yeah, I know CISA, for example, basically trying to push this as a standard.
But how would that help us then in this case?
Yeah, then in this case you can make at least agreements on how to do the encryption. What's getting involved is you can compare it to the chat apps we have nowadays. So in the US you have a lot of iMessage, and that works if everyone uses iMessage, and in Europe you have WhatsApp. And it works if everyone's using WhatsApp, but you cannot exchange between the two applications.
Key exchange problem again.
Yeah, and this is now addressed by the EU. They have basically a law, that's the gatekeeper law, where they say, okay, you need to open up your application, in this case a chat application, to collaborate with others if they want to start up as a chat app as well.
I foresee that's a mess. Like it's gonna be like
it's ups and downsides. We'll see how it goes.
I don't know if it's gonna be a really good idea to be forced to that, but because it will open API access to like everybody basically. Like
well, we'll see. I think it's also it's not only interesting for startups, but also for attackers, of course.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm sure that they will have way more information and way more ways to leverage this in a bad way.
So in conclusion, you need to trust your data to parties that you can trust, that are heavily regulated maybe, or at least have a lot of controls and are open about those controls. But that even isn't a guarantee. So it's more like in choosing. That's what I hear you guys say. Choosing which data to share in the first place. If it's not necessary, then don't get rid of it as soon as you don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And we need to, as an industry, maybe standardize on some kind of encryption thing. Yeah. That's probably going to be a hard thing.
Get it end-to-end encrypted. That would be nice.
All right. Gentlemen, thanks very much. We also have infographics on this particular attack. It's available to you, viewers, listeners. If you go to threat-talks.com, we have everything with all our episodes of this series. And also for this episode, there are specific infographics available that you can use. You're free to use, make internal presentations within your organization to explain about all the attacks that you've learned here. Thank you, guests, Luca, Rob. Thank you very much for your contributions. If you like this video, please like us and or subscribe to our channel. Helps us spread the word further, and it will make sure that next time we have a new episode next week, that you will get a notification from us. If you have any feedback, please let us know. team@threat-talks.com is the email address you can use for that. And finally, from the Security Operations Center Florida at Antwerp, I thank you very much and hope to see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Onto It Cybersecurity and M6. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.